Joining us now from Washington is Justice reporter Paula Reid. Paula, thanks so much for being with us. Former FBI Director James Comey was supposed to testify at this hearing today, as we've been talking about for much of the morning. But instead, as we saw, acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe stood in for him. So where does the agency stand on their investigation into Russia at this point and its ties possibly into our U.S. election?
I think you heard it right there in the soundbite from McCabe. Even in a post-Comey FBI, the work continues and the Russia investigation is ongoing. And Jamie, he made two really important points about the status of this investigation. First of all, he said that he does indeed believe that he has sufficient resources to undertake this work. Now, that's important because it contradicts reports yesterday that claimed that former FBI Director Comey went to the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, and asked for more resources and then was fired several days later. It appears McCabe's testimony contradicts those reports. Another important point that he made is that he does not believe, even with everything that's gone on, that an independent body or a special prosecutor needs to take over this investigation. That would ultimately be up to all roads right now lead back to Rod Rosenstein, but that would be his decision. And I can tell you, he too is staunchly opposed to handing off this inquiry. He believes that every investigation the Department of Justice does is independent and that they are trained to handle things regardless of politics.
And Paula, McCabe was also asked about the FBI's support of Director Comey. It didn't quite square with what the White House had to say. I want to play you some of that.
I can tell you, sir, that I worked very, very closely with Director Comey from the moment he started at the FBI. I was his executive assistant director of national security at that time. I then worked for him running the Washington field office. And of course, I've served as deputy for the last year. I can tell you that I hold Director Comey in the absolute highest regard. I have the highest respect for his considerable abilities and his integrity. And it has been the greatest privilege and honor of my professional life to work with him. I can tell you also that Director Comey enjoyed broad support within the FBI and still does to this day.
Paul, that's not the narrative the White House has put out. They said that folks in the FBI had told them specifically they also wanted Comey out. How do they square that?
That's right. I mean, the White House has said that part of the reason they fired him is because he had lost the confidence of the rank and file. But that's not what we've heard from sources. And having covered the FBI for almost 10 months now, since that infamous press conference, while there were, yes, certainly people within the FBI who were very upset about the outcome of that investigation, there was no evidence that people had lost confidence in the FBI director because of the way he had handled it. So just another way that McCabe is sort of undermining the narrative that the White House is putting out.
You know, Paula, there were reports as well that the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, threatened to quit. We had heard that earlier. The Washington Post put out an article saying that he almost resigned over Comey's firing, saying that his memo had invoked the reason for that firing. We just heard the senators being questioned about that. Neither one of them apparently asked Rosenstein about that. What do you make of this?
I was skeptical of those reports based on my previous experiences with Rod Rosenstein. The Department of Justice has denied those on the record. We've spoken to some sources close to him who are also waving us off of that. Now, the reason I'm skeptical about that is because, look, he's been in the Department of Justice for decades. He knew what he was doing when he wrote a 3-page memo, an unclassified memo, outlining criticisms of the decisions the FBI director has made over the past year. There's no reason he would not have thought that he and his memo would be used to lend credibility to this decision. Also, in his testimony, in conversations with him, it is obvious he knew what he was getting into with the Trump administration, and he was in lockstep with them on a lot of legal issues. I just can't see him, knowing what we do about his temperament, pitching a fit and threatening to quit over something that he would have seen coming a million miles away.
And Paul, you've been reporting that DOJ may actually appoint a different person to replace McCabe as FBI chief. Where does that stand?
Yesterday morning, the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General interviewed 4 candidates to potentially be an interim acting director. So they would replace McCabe until a permanent Comey successor is appointed. It will likely take some time. Does not appear that they had any kind of succession plan in place. So it's going to take a while for the White House and the Department of Justice to come up with someone who is going to be able to be confirmed to that position for 10 years. So in the interim, The Department of Justice is currently looking at other people. They're looking at McCabe, but also looking at 4 other highly qualified justice officials to fill that acting role.
I can't imagine that the White House, at this point, after this hearing, would be thrilled with the appointment of McCabe after some of the contradictory comments he made.
And
that's such a great point. You know, part of me wonders, knowing that he was going to testify, if part of this interview process wasn't a little bit of, signaling a little bit of a threat. Watch what you say. We got 4 extremely qualified people lined up here. I mean, that the optics sort of appear that way because they weren't shy about sharing with us what they were doing.
Right.
Justice reporter Paula Reid in Washington. Paula, thank you.